Hello everyone and welcome back to the 2023 FIDE World Cup held in Baku, Azerbaijan. Today it's a big day. It's the beginning of quarterfinals in the open section and semi-finals in the women's section. Stakes are very high now, candidates' places at stake, a lot of prize money on the line as well. And yeah, it's my first day here commentating. I'm very excited, and for the first time ever, I will be joined by Peter Lecko. Peter, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. You've been commentating on the tournament. How have you been finding it so far?
Yeah, hello David, hello everyone. Super exciting. Really, we have so much dramas, everything. We have witnessed everything that chess can produce. And however, I mean, David, you have been the one who played the World Cup. Also, you can maybe tell us later in the show your own experience.
Yeah, I just got back from Baku a few days ago. I'm still a bit heartbroken after being knocked out, but yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. This is a good consolation. But meanwhile, let's go to the women's bracket. I know in Baku, that tournament hall is getting smaller and smaller, fewer players now left in that big hall. And here we see we're down to the last four, the final four: Anna Muzychuk, Nagul Salimova, Alexandra Goyachkina, and Tan Zhongyi. And there we see the matchups. Actually, three of these four were also in the semi-finals 2 years ago in 2021 at the World Cup. Impressive stuff. Peter, what do you think so far of these four? Any predictions?
No predictions at all. I mean, the tournament is very unpredictable to basically generalize anything. Goryachkina had an incredible tiebreak yesterday against Harika. She did manage to go through, facing Tan Zhongyi, the player who knocked her out of the candidates. I mean, from the candidate matches. So yes, so many storylines, but also Salimova, the dark horse. She has been truly stunning. She's very aggressive at the same time. Also, she has shown a very nice technique as well during the tournament. And Anna Muzychuk, I mean, her road beating her sister Maria, and then also her best friend Elizabeth Petz. It probably shows that this is an emotional roller coaster ride for all the players.
Yeah, it's been quite the ride for everyone so far. They'll all be feeling unbeatable as well, having made it this far into the tournament. Let's check out the pairings in the open section, the final 8 there in the quarterfinals, and some big matches. We saw just one playoff yesterday, between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Vidit Gujrathi. Vidit was the one to win, and now we see 4 Indians in the quarterfinals. I think the one we'll be following most closely of all, Peter, Magnus Carlsen against Gukesh. Some juicy matchups.
Yeah, absolutely juicy. It's Magnus Carlsen against Gukesh, but all the matchups are very important. We know that the players who win their matches reach the semifinals, and since 3 spots are at stake in the World Cup for the candidates, there is so much tension. Yeah, if you feel like if you reach to the semifinals, then you have such a good chance of qualifying for your big dream to the candidates. I can imagine how nervous Vidit is, for example. Yeah, this is a golden opportunity playing against Abbasov. If he wins that match, then he's in the semi-final with all the chances for the candidates. Gukesh, number 7 at the world, I believe. He has been rising and rising, faces Magnus Carlsen. It's going to be a hell of a match.
Yeah, and we all know Magnus against teenagers recently. It's been a bit of a rough ride for him, so anything could happen here. Gukesh does start with the white pieces. We see him getting ready. Knowing Magnus, I expect him to walk in maybe 30 seconds before the game starts. But yeah, you mentioned some of the underdogs there. Abbasov, the local hero. Could he do it on home soil? Vidit, golden opportunity for him. Also the All-American battle between Caruana and Dominguez. I think maybe that's the one that I think might be closest. He might go all the way to tiebreaks. They know each other so well. And we will talk about the permutations later, who can qualify for the candidates with what results. But yeah, Peter, I'm excited. Again, no predictions for you?
No real prediction at all. I mean, there is so much nerves involved. Yeah, I don't think that in such many matches you can actually call anyone a real favorite or anyone an underdog. All the players who already reached here, they have the confidence level. They really have this boost, yeah, that they think like, yes, this is my tournament, I can do it. And also Pragnanda against Edigaisi. I mean, I think Prag mentioned that they are very good friends. They were spending their time together outside of the chessboard during the World Cup as well. And now facing each other for the semifinals, it should be a very big challenge on both of them.
Yeah, apparently they're going on walks together every night, even before facing each other in these quarterfinals. I saw them in the gym actually together in Baku every evening. So impressive stuff from those young Indians. Here we see Goryachkina waiting for her opponent to arrive, and now Anna Muzychuk waiting for her semi-finals. Some really experienced players there in the women's section. And yeah, it looks like we have a few minutes left till liftoff. Oof, yeah, I mean, these classical games, they're always really tense, really cagey. It feels like, I don't know, at least I wouldn't be taking too much risk. It feels like so much is at stake here for the players. But of course, if it gets down to tie breaks, even more nerves. Yeah, Erigaisi takes his seat.
Yeah, we know exactly that why the players are also so nervous. Yeah, a lot at stake, but before the game, especially before the classical games, so much preparation is involved. Yeah, and you go through all the possible scenarios, all the lines. You have hundreds of pages of analysis to check on your screen. Really demanding stuff. And before the game, you don't know exactly what to expect. So you are expecting everything. Yeah, like if you would go to an exam and they can ask you about every single topic in the world. So a lot of tension. However, once the game settles, then you only have to face one opening of your opponent.
Yeah, that's the beauty, but also the downside of playing in these short mini matches. You only get to try out one or two of your opening lines. When I was out there in Baku, I realized I have like 3 pages of notes, let alone 1,000, and I couldn't even remember those. So yeah, these players, of course, though, all opening theoreticians. Fabiano among them. And he starts off with black against Dominguez. What do you think, Peter? Will the players with the black pieces go for that conventional approach? Will they just be trying to stay solid in this first game and take their chances tomorrow with white?
Well, I think that it's a good strategy to be as solid as possible at the beginning. However, these matches are so difficult. So if you feel that your opponent is actually trying to get the initiative and you have a chance to counter it, then probably you have to try to use that opportunity with black as well, because it's not a given at all, knowing how well these players are prepared with the black pieces, that you will get a serious chance with the white pieces. And if you are ready to bounce, and Gukesh has done that against Wang Hao with incredible precision, when suddenly Wang Hao showed a sign of weakness, Gukesh used that to his advantage and then went on to win the match quite smoothly.
Yeah, it looks like we have under 1 minute now. The clock is ticking. We will get started any moment. Last few words before we get started, Peter. Who has impressed you the most out of all of these players in the open section so far?
Well, I think all of them. I mean, everybody has their own story, yeah, to reach all the way to the quarterfinals. I mean, Vidit has been fighting like a lion. Yeah, he had that incredible match against Matthias Blubaum that went down to the sudden that game. Then also yesterday, he had to fight his way against the very strong Jan Nepomniachtchi. He knocked him out without being in the slightest danger. That was truly stunning. We know exactly how good Jan is, and there is the handshake.
There's the handshake. Magnus Carlsen just beats the bell here. He gets into the playing hall a few seconds before that clock ticks to 0, and I think we'll see the first moves any moment. There we go. We're off. The quarterfinals in the open section has begun. Gukesh, he's been very impressive himself. He's been quite versatile in the openings, and he starts with D4. Magnus, do you think he's going to show a lot of respect to his young opponent here, play something super solid?
Well, I'm expecting knight f6, e6. That's kind of almost certain for me, but we know also from Magnus that if you think like, aha, so the commentators think that that's a certainty, then let me try something else.
Yeah, I must admit, I was having dinner with Magnus every evening in Baku, and he was just talking about how tough it is, especially with choosing openings in classical chess. He was like, oh, I'm blocked here, I'm blocked there. My opponent will force a draw here, my opponent will force a draw there. But at least now he's playing an extremely ambitious opponent, so all of those thoughts can go out of his mind. And yeah, he's had a rocky journey himself a bit, Magnus, especially against Vincent Keimer. I think it's time. Yep, there we go, knight f6. Time to go
knight
solid.
f6. Also, what I noticed that Magnus usually always jadubs his pieces first, but he jadubs the piece with which he will move. But it's kind of funny that it looks like he will play knight f6, but then he jadubs everything. And bishop f4, well, that's a surprise. That's the London.
Wow, London system from Gukesh. I haven't seen him employ that for a while. I know it's in the arsenal, the repertoire of every top player these days. But Magnus, he's one of the main proponents of the London. bit of a surprise here, gotta say.
Yeah, and look at his reaction, Magnus's reaction. Yeah, this is certainly something that he did not expect. One thing that truly impressed me, apart of the Indian youngsters being very strong everywhere, but that they are so incredibly versatile in the openings. They are super deeply prepared everywhere they can play. E4, D4, C4, Knight F3, the Gukesh, Prague, now also Vidit started playing E4. That wasn't also his main repertoire before. Just, they are so strong.
Yeah, so strong, and just incredible memories to kind of understand these nuances so deeply in every single opening. I know Erigaisi was playing the London system a lot recently, and yeah, Magnus, how will he reply? He normally replies quite classically as black, I think, here as well. Quick d5, e6, bishop d6. But yeah, we'll see. It's definitely thrown him off, this unexpected London system from Gukesh. Wow, yeah. I mean, we shouldn't read too much into the opening. Of course, Magnus will get a playable position, but Gukesh just showing no fear at all here. I was in London yesterday, so maybe this is in tribute to that as well.
Yes, certainly. And we have seen also mind games between Magnus Carlsen and Vasily Ivanchuk that featured d4, d5, knight f3. And I think the whole world who was watching was thinking like, what on earth is going on? These two brilliant players, the two giants of chess, the legends, spending time on move 2. And now this repeats itself after bishop f4. Clearly, yeah, we are expecting something like d5, e6, bishop e6, but there is also an argument to be made for e6, c5. Yeah, there are so many different setups from black.
Yeah, different setups, different move orders. Lots to choose from for Magnus here. He's definitely not out of book after bishop f4, but after a few minutes, he'll start to speed up. And there we see handshakes in the background. It looks like other games have started as well. Abasov just arriving there a couple of minutes late, which is actually against the regulations of the tournament. Hopefully no punishment there. Here we go. Vidit has opened with e4. You said it. He's kind of branched out to this in recent times. And Abasov tends to be a Sicilian player, as far as I know. These guys, they're both 28 years old. They must know each other very well from youth events onwards. And there we go, Sicilian on the board.
Yes, e4, c5. I believe Abasov was playing the Sveshnikov, or at least he tries to play the Sveshnikov, because it's not a given at all that after knight f3, knight c6, you're going to see the Sveshnikov. The Rossolimo is as popular, yeah, knight f3 on the board. Let's take a look. I'm expecting knight c6. Yes, it's on the board.
And predictions now open Sicilian. Lots of theory, or something a bit slower, quieter? Maybe the bishop landing on b5?
I think bishop b5, that's kind of a very popular choice. And it leads to strategical battle. However, since Vidit is quite new again to mainstream theory inside e4, bishop b5. All right, so exactly, Rossolimo. I wanted to give a case that we don't have enough information yet. Yeah, what type of e4 player he is. He's usually a very principled player. He goes for the sharpest lines. And we see bishop b5, e6. This was featured in the match between Peter Svidler and Abasov in the tiebreaks. Actually, the game that Abasov went on to win with the black pieces exactly featured this very variation.
Yeah, and it's been very topical, e6. I think throughout the World Cup, I've seen very many clashes actually in this opening line. So we'll await to see how Vidit replies there. Meanwhile, this is the game between Prague and Erigaisi, the Indian derby here. And looks like very early stages here. Looks, wow, okay, like a bit of a side variation to the Fianchetto Grunfeld, symmetrical here. And okay, the solid system for black just looks like white's done a bit of a dance with the queen, Peter. Interesting stuff here. Interesting opening idea for white.
Yes, well, actually, yes, this is a g3, c6 Grunfeld. However, the modern touch, yeah, that it happens from a reti. Knight f3 was played by Prague. Arjun opted with d5, g3, g6. I think a line you are very familiar with. I will be asking you later. Bishop g2, bishop g7, d4, knight f6, castles, castles, c4, c6, and the slightly mysterious queen a4, knight f d7, queen b3. So please tell us what you think of all this.
Actually, I was planning to play Queen A4, this line, as white myself in my clash in round 3 against Wang Hao. But I was planning, if knight f to d7 had happened, not to play queen to b3, but to take on d5 and drop back the white queen to d1 if knight to b6. So just getting the queen out of the way, developing normally, and arguing that black's knight is misplaced on b6. I think this is one of the main lines, at least in this variation. It's very symmetrical, very close to level, of course, but minimal risk for white. Queen b3 makes some sense. You've lost a move with the white queen, but at least you've argued that black's knights are a bit clumsy now, getting in each other's way. And if black is forced to trade off in the center, then okay, you have an extra central pawn. dc4, I'm expecting, and then something to do with e5 for black. But yeah, it has surprised Erigaisi, and that's not an easy thing to do. He's one of the best prepared players out there on the circuit these days.
Yeah, this queen a4, knight fd7, queen b3 is also something new to me. I do remember that officially the last word in theory was, I think, knight bd7 with the idea c takes d5, knight b6, and if queen b3, then I know, but that's when white is going for immediate queen a4. Yeah, it's so easy to miss, but something like queen b3, queen takes d5 used to be some point that I do remember.
Yeah, so many nuances, so many move order tricks here. Easy to get confused. And that's why Erigaisi, I guess, is spending a few minutes just finding his bearings. Yeah, I mean, looks like a decent idea. These lines in general with g3 don't tend to entail too much risk for white, so I like what Pragg is doing. And yeah, looks like early days, but we will see a trade of pawns. We will see black trying to fight for the center, but it's definitely the pressure on Erigaisi to equalize here. Nothing too special, at least at these early stages.
I think this gives us a chance to catch up with Dominguez against Fabiano Caruana. And wow, I mean, I know some Italian, but I have never ever seen the knight on b4 landing from black so quickly. So let us go back to the start of the game to understand. It's clear that it was an Italian. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. Yeah, Lenny is such a big opening expert, also in the Ruy Lopez and also in the Italian. You just never know exactly which line, which opening he will choose. And Fabiano goes for knight f6, d3, bishop e7. That's I think kind of a surprise, because I don't really recall Fabiano play bishop e7. Dubov and Magnus, I do recall, but usually Fabi always develops the bishop to c5. Now Lenny opts for knight c3, castles, d6, a4, a typical way of grabbing some space on the queen side, and suddenly Fabiano jumps with the knight to b4. Wow.
Yeah, I guess he's arguing that white's last move, despite gaining space, has weakened the b4 square. Maybe he's just setting up a quick c6, d5. The knight normally needs to get out of the way, right, Peter? In these positions, it's normally misplaced on c6 anyway. So why not using the b4 square? I must admit, I've had this position myself as black, and I haven't seen this idea either, knight to b4. But Fabi knows what he's doing, and of course, they know each other very well. They've worked together plenty of times. Dominguez and Fabi, Dominguez his former second, so maybe a bit of a surprise weapon. Maybe he was fearing if he'd gone for his usual bishop c5 lines that Dominguez would have been knowing what he was planning there. So interesting.
Yes,
I like it. Knight b4.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very good point, that whenever two friends meet each other or training partners, yeah, we don't know exactly how close they are, exactly if they are still working together. That match versus Magnus Carlsen from 2018, the London match that we are referring to, that's a known fact that Fabiano has been one of the main helpers of Fabiano. Definitely they worked at least for half a year, if not for a year together. But what happened afterwards, we don't have so much information, at least personally I don't have. And but it's a good point, yeah, that probably Fabiano felt like we have never discussed the line with bishop e7 against with each other. And then when we are playing against each other, it's so nice to bring the game immediately to some fresh territory.
Mm-hmm. Especially with the Italian these days, it feels like everyone has just discussed these bishop c5 lines to death. They know everything up to move 20, 30. But bishop e7, definitely a bit forgotten. And like you say, apart from maybe Magnus and Dubov and a few others, it's yeah, it's not as often seen. So at least now it's a fresh game, and Dominguez can't rely on opening theory. I think that's a very wise choice from Fabiano. We won't see anything too theoretical here. And yeah, ideas for white, I don't know. Bishop back to b3, rook e1, h3, all of the normal, typical moves. But black is, yeah, looks solid. Going to play for a quick d5 maybe, or maybe black will do the same, just h6, rook e8, and the game goes on.
Yeah, black is solid and black is also flexible. I think that's what a little bit disturbs me from the white side, that I can't really guess what will be the next move from black. Yeah, that, as you mentioned, yeah, your intuition said that maybe c6, d5. Then suddenly also the question that, who knows, maybe black actually wants to push the pawn all the way to c5 and then get that type of grip on the center and then go for bishop e6. There are so many different transformation of structures, and white has to make up his mind, knowing Lanier being a very deep player. He takes all his time. That does he go rook e1, does he go h3? But we have to wait and see.
Yep, we will check back in on that game. Still very early stages. Lenier has made a move, but yeah, here we see the bird's eye view. The games are progressing nicely. We will check in on the women's semi-finals a bit later on. But my eye is drawn to two games. Gukesh against Carlsen has taken a bit of a weird turn, not your usual London system. And also the game between Vidit and Abasov. Very wild stuff there, very imbalanced position at these early stages. So maybe we start with Magnus's game. Maybe we jump in, show what Gukesh has been doing. He's been greedy. He's occupied the center with his pawns, and feels like Magnus is taking some risks, strategically at least, at these early stages. He's down 12 minutes on the clock already. Magnus Carlsen here, and he's allowed allowed Gukesh to build this big pawn center. Oof,
yes.
Thoughts, Peter? I'm a bit surprised.
We are actually trying to get the games correctly, because we had some technical issue. I mean, we do know that the Lenier Dominguez Fabiano Cardinal game was correct. We also knew that Ragnanda's game against Erigaishi was correct, but we are waiting for a fix, and we will be jumping right into the action in the Gukesh Magnus Carlsen game once everything is set.
Yeah, as mentioned there in the featured chat, this looks a bit like a Jabava London system now with white's knight on c3, rather than traditional London system kind of structures. So it's up to Magnus now to fight for that center. I'm expecting the move d5. He needs to do something. Maybe we can backtrack, Peter, and just show an action replay of the last few moves, show how we got here.
Yes, because actually only 5 moves had been played, so we didn't miss on anything. But actually we did, because look at this. Yeah, d4, knight f6, bishop f4. We were talking about e6, c5, or d5, e6, bishop d6 being very typical. And Magnus felt like, you know what? I want to get out of theory as quickly as possible. Opted for b7, b6, which, however, did not surprise Gukesh at all. And he answered with the move knight c3, a very energetic way of fighting for the center immediately. Bishop b7 was met by f3. The intentions are absolutely clear to go e4 as quickly as possible. And Magnus did play the move e6, allowing e4. And that's the current position.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, feels like he has to do something. I have a feeling as well, I've seen Magnus play like this in Blitz, maybe even Bullet. So Gukesh could have been prepared potentially. And yeah, d5 strikes me as black's most common move, but it does invite white to occupy more of the center, to expand. What are your thoughts here, Peter? I don't really see too many tempting choices for black, other than challenging immediately with d5.
Yeah, well, there is a big question, yeah, that if you play d5, how does white react? Because there is even the argument to be made, this typical Jobava London idea with knight b5. Yeah, let's just put it on the board what we are talking about. d5 can be answered by knight b5, very strongly threatening knight takes c7, and if black is forced to play knight a6, then suddenly white can maybe transform the position to the French structure and claim that that knight on a6 will be misplaced. For example, knight d7. And now the big question, does the bishop fall back to e3? And then and while we are discussing this, Magnus says, you know what, guys, no, don't even talk about knight b5. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to waste the tempo on a6, but make sure that knight b5 will not come.
Yeah, don't try this at home, kids. It looks like Magnus is taking liberties, playing really slow moves. He's just gone against all chess wisdom. He's not even fighting with the center right now, but he does prevent that knight b5 idea, like you say, Peter. But he hasn't got Gukesh out of book. Gukesh continuing to blitz, queen to d2. Getting ready to castle queenside, maybe? Just staying really flexible with white. I'm impressed. The opening preparation here.
Incredible. I mean, I believe that Magnus's reasoning behind b6 was that, you know what, okay, Gukesh does play some London systems with bishop f4, so probably he is very well prepared in the main lines, but let me try something rare, something unusual, and he will be out of book. No. The answer is a very big no. Gukesh is still blitzing his moves. He's preparing long castles with the center and with black's king stuck yet on e8, and I'm not seeing that king to be moving pretty soon anywhere. I'm guessing that black will have to play the move d7, d5. I don't see any other way of playing this structure.
Yeah, if you leave it too much longer, white will start throwing pawns forward on the king side. White will get castled. White will be very ready. So it feels like now or never for Magnus to fight with d5. And the only question there for Gukesh is how to react. Close the center, leave things. I don't know if you can keep the tension in any way. If you close it, it does become very much like a French defense, as you mentioned, Peter. And what do you think? Is this a good version of a French for black, if there is such a thing?
I think that the reasoning why Magnus is ready to go for this is that he believes that, for example, after a6 included, without the knight b5 idea, something like e5, knight fd7 is perfectly playable, because then black will have a very quick c7, c5, and one could give a case that the knight on c3 will be misplaced. The bishop from f4 also has to come back to e3 to get f4, knight f3 in, and then we get some kind of a French structure with knight third move, knight c3, knight f6, which is quite tolerable with this new kind of b6, bishop b7, c5 idea. I believe that probably Gukesh's reaction would be even to sacrifice a pawn. Maybe he can even do something like long castles, because compared to any of these typical sacrifices, gambit kind of play, it seems like white got some tempi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how would you try and justify it here if black were to be greedy and grab the pawn on e4? Like you say, it looks tempting, this gambit. You're ahead in development, but what's next?
Well, I mean, if we talk about the gambit like fe4 and black taking on e4, let's just discuss this position first. Yeah, so takes, and then, okay, something like queen e3. Yeah, targeting that bishop, making sure that we also get access to that king. I don't know, maybe the queen goes to g3. If black falls back with the bishop to d5, I might be tempted to try something aggressive with c4. The problem what I'm seeing with white, that it is not so easy to sacrifice this pawn, because after f takes e4, knowing Magnus, for example, a move like bishop b4 could be a very flexible move and a very annoying move for white. And this gives us also the chance to talk about eventually knight takes e4, but knight takes e4 doesn't put black under so much pressure that he feels obliged to take the pawn. So a lot of nuances here.
Yeah, and Magnus trying to work out those details. I really like it either way from Gukesh, what he's doing. I think maybe if there is one Achilles heel in Magnus's game, it's when his opponents kind of can attack him from an early stage. Yeah, and we all know that some of the young Indian players have had success, and he does play d5. Yeah, they have had some success when attacking him. Moment of truth. How deep does Gukesh's preparation go? He takes a moment. I'm expecting him to move immediately. He's played quickly up to this point. Let's stick with this game a little bit longer to see what Gukesh does. I want to see the sacrifice, Peter. I don't want to see a closed position. I think Magnus will be very happy there.
Yeah, well, the big question is how deep is Gukesh's preparation? Maybe it was just because if you go for d4, bishop f4, this is the least you worry about, right? I mean, okay, here you definitely got a game. Everything is ahead. You have the center, you have the white pieces. Yes, black is solid, but why on earth would you really spend too much time analyzing this position unless you really have this feeling? And there we go. Long castle. Okay, Gukesh is prepared. Forget everything what I said. He is prepared.
Yeah, for sure. I think he was just plucking up the courage. He took 10, 20 seconds and he was like, okay, I'm not going to get this opportunity again to take down Magnus. Castle's queenside, pawn sacrifice. We like it. And yeah, actually, that structure you mentioned, Peter, with closing the pawn structure. I was at a training camp recently, and Magnus himself was kind of giving a talk. Prag was there. Yeah, Sadwani, some other really strong players were there. And he was saying basically that structure, if white were to close the center with pawn on e5, it's basically a king's Indian, just with the board kind of flipped. So the king side being the queen side, this structure. And yeah, everything's pretty much in king's Indian position, just pawn break, easy play for black. So I think this is a really good strategic choice from Gukesh. And yeah, after castle's queenside, I think we have to investigate what's going to happen if Magnus does grab the pawn. Or maybe we leave him to think, because it's a big decision, and that would be the most logical path to continue.
Yeah, I think that Magnus definitely will take his time, because he's certainly not prepared. And if Gukesh would have spent time, he would have shown some uncertainty. Yeah, that he isn't familiar with the position, then it would be so much easier for Magnus to make up his mind. But knowing that he's probably very much in his opponent's territory, I don't see him grabbing the pawn. That's basically out of question. The big question is, does he have a solid alternative? And I'm looking at the position, and I do see that the computer actually mentions that b6, b5 is kind of a clever move. And it has a strategic feature. I believe that you are tempted with moves like this.
Actually, this would be maybe more Magnus's alley, because he keeps things closed, he keeps things solid. It threatens b4, as you mentioned, maybe putting some pressure indirectly on white's pawn center. Also, some of those lines you mentioned with white kind of exploding the center and pushing c4 to get d5 in, that will be prevented with this b5 move. For example, knight takes d5 now, and yeah, no c4, so black's very happy. Yeah, I like this b5. Of course, it's a computer move, not obvious. Maybe immediately. I guess bishop e7 or a move like that would be the alternative. But yeah, I don't think I would be brave enough to capture the pawn either. I'd probably look at it for 5-10 minutes just to kind of get over the temptation to be greedy. But yeah, it doesn't feel practical here to walk into the opponent's prep.
Yes, and exactly, I think that's why you're also famous of getting into time trouble, right? That you did mention that you would spend like 5-10 minutes just thinking why I can't take this pawn. That's the classical chess, yeah, that we are, as perfectionists, you want to get the answer to every single move, but this actually comes back to haunt you, yeah? Then in time trouble, you already don't have time to spend so much time. What is your take on this? How do you like your time management?
Oh, Peter, I hate my time management, especially now I'm getting a bit older and the adrenaline pumps a bit less quickly and it's harder to make decisions. We were talking a bit before the show about my World Cup, and I was pretty much eliminated by Wang Hao in the playoffs because I spent too much time in one of the rapid games, just making kind of decisions between 2 or 3 roughly equal moves because I wanted to choose the best one. I wanted to sit, enjoy, learn about the position. But of course, like you said, being practical sometimes is the best way, and saving 5-10 extra minutes definitely comes in handy. In that game that I was knocked out, I think I had 20 seconds left when I made my fatal error, when I could easily have had 5-10 minutes on the clock if I'd just been a bit more kind of circumspect with my time. So yeah, I think that's what sets the likes of Magnus apart. And these young Indian players, they seem to be really good on the clock, very rarely in time pressure. Yeah, I don't know about you. Throughout your career, was it something you consciously worked on?
Well, I mean, time management became also my biggest nightmare, and I think the reason why I was also losing way too much nerves during the games. Yeah, you are then out of your comfort zone. My wife was going crazy that why is Peter having only 1 minute on his clock on move 25 and he is brilliantly prepared, you know. There are all kinds of scenarios. And finally, it ended up me getting into the commentary. Yeah, because that's kind of, you know, when I feel like I can think, I can discuss positions, I have no time pressure. But yes, over the board, then every single nuance interests you, excites you, and you try to get answer to every single thing. That's great if you are at home and you're analyzing, but over the board, you just can't afford it.
Yeah, we need to take tips from Peter Svidler or other commentators who they commentate, but somehow they are able to play quickly over the board. I don't know how they do it. I agree. Perfectionism, it's a curse more than anything. The one good thing, though, is that sometimes, like you say, people do focus a bit too much on the time on the clock, and they forget about our real weaknesses and other kind of things that are going on the board. But meanwhile, yeah, enough about time trouble. We'll talk about that later, maybe, as we get closer to the magical move 40, to the time control. And here we see another game between Vidit and Abasov. And okay, we talked about it being a Sicilian. Look at the pawn structure, Peter. Black has the bishop
exactly.
pair, queen on g5. What's happening here? Crazy
well,
position.
that was my question. I thought, like, what? Was there some transmission error? I mean, we did see white playing the 1e4, right? I mean, we see it on our camera. And we don't see a pawn on e4. And there is a new pawn on the e file and b3. At first I thought, like, what? It was some first move b3, and no, it cannot be. No, it was Rossolimo. Unbelievable stuff. What are we witnessing here?
Yeah, we have to backtrack and see how this happened. It wasn't 1b3, even if it looks like it could be. Okay, Sicilian. We see a capture on c6. This reminds me of the 2012 match between Anand and Gelfand.
Exactly. That's where all this opening really got developed. I think not really before the preparation for the match, but much more during the match, because it was clear that the Sveshnikov did surprise Vichy. And yeah, this b3, d6, e5 is one of the main ideas, trying to isolate those weaknesses, those double pawns. But black has very active play, d takes e5, knight takes e5. Now, okay, probably some people will ask, why isn't queen d4 winning with a double attack on the knight and on the rook? I guess just very quickly we should at least talk about that white has different stunning ways to deal with this move. Actually, okay, knight c4 would be the natural one, being the main point being after queen takes a1, we go knight c3. And this queen is not trapped immediately because we can't trap it with bishop b2, but it's trapped long terms. And the computer confirms bishop a6, something like simply short castles, and then white activates the queen to f3. It will always be a very nice tempo move, and eventually the bishop will be developed and black's queen will be targeted. So quite some stunning tactical idea right from the beginning.
Yep, greed is not good in this case. Taking that rook, it's poisoned in the corner. I actually had this myself, I think, after that 2012 match in an open tournament. My opponent looked at me after I'd played knight takes e5 as if I blundered and played queen d4. And only after knight c4, my opponent spent like 30 minutes before deciding not to take the rook on a1. But of course, not a good journey for the queen either way. So queen g5 instead, Peter. Going in a different direction, hitting g2, hitting the knight on e5. Forcing white's knight back to some awkward squares.
Knight g4. Knight h6 comes with a tempo. Knight e3, the knight falls back, needs to protect the pawn, of course. It's all part of the plan. Knight f5, short castles. And now we already get the chance to understand and admire the transformation of the structure. Knight takes e3, f takes e3. Black develops with bishop d6. White develops with bishop b2. Of course, now it's very important to highlight that black was already threatening with a devilish double attack on the h2 pawn and on the rook. So, of course, white develops with bishop b2. And black plays the move short castle. And look at Abasov's clock situation. I mean, it seems like this is all kind of his prep. It's a very interesting double edge position. White is very solid, has the better pawn structure, but the two bishops should give black probably enough counterplay.
Yeah, it's especially impressive considering Abasov arrived a bit late to the game and he's just blitzed out all of these moves. And yeah, I remember preparing for myself, and he plays all sorts of different openings, especially with white, but with black, quite principled. And this feels like he's definitely trying to challenge white immediately. What would be a kind of natural plan here for Vidit? It feels like he needs to get his knight out. Ideally wants to land on maybe c4 in front of those doubled isolated pawns. Queen f3, like you say.
Yes, there are so many different routes. Yeah, when you ask me what do I think, I was not sure. I mean, one thing it was sure that white's queen probably belongs to f3, and then depending how black will react to that move, we will decide that is knight c3, knight e4, for example, a big tempo move. Yeah, if that's a big tempo, then I somehow feel like knight c3 might be a very nice developing move. On the other hand, if it does nothing, then strategically knight a3, knight c4 is of course probably to be preferred. it's such a complex position, and Vidit is taking his time. One detail, however, I was following the interviews of the official site, and there it was like common knowledge that Abbasov is always coming late, and there was the question that why does he come late? And he was revealing some info. He was saying that he's just he just does not like this tension before the game. Yeah, so he wants to come and already start to play instead of just sit there and wait 1-2 minutes before starting. It was very interesting. So it's not like he's preparing till the last second at home. It could also be the case, but much more that he prefers this way.
Yeah, and we shouldn't forget, he has a lot of fans out there. They are now in the playing hall, I think. They're standing outside. Whenever I was walking to the venue, you have to kind of dodge. You have to make your way through all these autograph hunters, these selfie seekers. So yeah, he's the local boy. He's got a bunch of fans cheering for him. So I can understand trying to kind of save that till after the game. But his nerves have held up well, Abbasov. He's gone through, 3 playoffs now, unscathed, knocking out Geary, knocking out Svidler, knocking out some really big names. And yeah, I like his position. I'm biased. I like my 2 bishops, even with a fractured pawn structure. But yeah, maybe I'm influenced by the fact that he's still in prep, whereas Vidit now on his own in the tank.
Yes, I mean, okay, I think there is also a clear case that we have to issue, yeah, that Black might be able to threaten Queen H4. That was the reason why I felt like Queen FC at least stabilizes my king side. It's not really attacking the pawn on C6. That's an additional feature, but I just wanted to make sure that we are able to handle the pressure against the H2 pawn, yeah, if Queen H4 happens. For example, that I already highlighted that Knight C3 with the idea of eventually going to E4 is clearly met by Queen H4 if Black just wants to make a draw, for example, yeah? And that's certainly not something that White wants to let happen. We know exactly that Vidit is a very ambitious player, very principled player with the white pieces. He's not getting impressed that, oh, okay, my opponent is in preparation. No. And Queen FC had been played.
Wow, and not just Queen F3, Peter, but F5 immediately from Abbasov, and looks like a pawn sacrifice to me. F5. What am I missing? Queen takes C6. Hits the bishop on D6, hits the rook on A8.
Let's check it out.
Both?
Wow. Well, the answer is, the computer is giving us the answer, and I felt like, because Abbasov is still in his prep, so we cannot really speculate. Yes, Queen E7 is apparently the key move, setting up Bishop B7. And if White grabs that rook, nothing really changes. Black goes Bishop B7. And after Queen takes A7, Black plays the move, stunning, quiet little move. Queen C7, yes, setting up Bishop takes H2 and also setting Rook A8, trapping the Queen. Certainly, Vidit will not let that happen. And here we come to that point. What I also mentioned, I somehow felt that Black has already played the move F5, so now the move Knight C3 is out of question. The Knight E4 move does not come with the tempo. So I feel that the maneuver that you immediately indicated, Knight AC, Knight C4, trying to fight for that E5 square for the dark squares, that's the most natural move. However, after Knight AC, probably Black will play Bishop A6.
Yeah, get ready to chop off that knight if it lands on C4. Yeah, wow. I mean, this is the type of thing at the top level. Sometimes you prepare an idea, you see these computer lines where you can give up a rook in the corner. We've already seen one, and now we see a second idea of giving up the rook. You see it, you're like, okay, it's too cool not to play. And then you just go for it. And meanwhile, Vidit, he's going to be calculating that line first, taking the pawn that we showed. Queen takes C6, and he's going to be mulling over the kind of potential profit, the risk involved. I think it's too much risk as well. You might win a pawn, you might run away with the queen, but you lose too much time, you open up the bishops. And then the fear will start to kick in. And look at that, Vidit already looking away from the board, being like, oh, I've been out-prepared. And that doesn't happen very often. He's another one, Vidit, who's just banging down the moves usually. Normally he's the one to surprise his opponents. Abbasov.
Exactly, and also there is this feeling, yeah, that yesterday Vidit was involved in this very nerve-wracking tie-break match against Jan Nepomniachtchi, and how much energy he has spent on that match, right? And if he would have gotten a comfortable opening, I don't think that those kind of energy losses weigh in so much, because you simply feel like, okay, you are in control, and you automatically tend to forget what happened the day before. However, when you are caught by some unpleasant surprise and your opponent is playing some very energetic moves and ask some real questions, then you might tend to lean towards safety. Yeah, that you think like, okay, hang on. First of all, I'm super solid with the black pieces. I'm kind of completely exhausted already from earlier events of the event. So let's try to play solidly. I mean, that's why I feel like this knight a3, for example, knight a3, let's just make this moves, bishop a6, and then followed by something like d3. Even a case could be made by knight c4. Okay, please take on c4. Hang on, the reason why I stopped, because after takes, there is some kind of double attack on the pawn on h2 and the pawn on c4. Not sure we want to let that happen. That's another case for eventually first just reassuring the center with d3 and then take it from there.
Yeah, and on that note, Peter, I think it's time to take our first break of the day. Looks like we've kind of ended the opening stage of most of the games. The games have slowed down slightly, players taking their first real big thinks of the game, and we'll be back in just a few minutes where we will be checking out the action in the women's semi-finals. So stay tuned, everyone. We'll see you very shortly.